Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Zoo Crew My Story podcast. My name is John, and I am an alcoholic. Please be sure to subscribe, like, share, and comment on our videos so that YouTube will send them out to alcoholics looking for recovery. Today, we have the lovely Manhattan sharing their recovery story and experience, strength, and hope with us. They are going to tell us what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Please keep in mind that this will be going on an Alcoholics Anonymous website. So without further ado, I give you Miss Manhattan. Come on in, Manhattan.
Thank you, John. Manhattan, alcoholic addict. John, thank you for your service and thank you for all the incredible scripts from the emotional sobriety workshops. Really grateful for you and the zoo crew. So, what it was like? Well, I never drank normally. I did not start drinking until my mid 20s because I already had a background of a lot of turmoil, homelessness from the start of the age of 9, and a lot of things that happened. Matter of fact, when I started drinking, I had just started community college and had less than a third grade education because we'd been on the streets for so long. And I was repeating a lot of my family of origin stuff, not knowing how to deal with any of it. And I should probably say at the top that there's going to be some trigger warnings, possibly. I will not go into depth around suicide and abuse and whatnot, but I may alight upon them as a way of just keeping track of what happened. So or what it was like. So for me, like I said, drinking was never a normal thing. I didn't know how to do anything normally. I have had great difficulties in adulting in general ever since I became emancipated from a foster home when I was 16, that I was in briefly here in San Diego, California. And I lived with a lot of chronic, and still do, a lot of chronic pain in my body, a lot of psychological and emotional pain. And relationships were my first drug of choice, just because I was so lonely all the time. And that's oftentimes how you survive on the streets. As a young person, is relationships. So alcohol did not come into play because my mother was very mentally ill and also had gone to Alcoholics Anonymous. But so she was very adamant that, we don't drink or do drugs. And let's be honest, our lives were so crazy already, my siblings and I, that there was no need for alcohol and drugs at that point because we were just trying to survive our mother's chaos. We didn't take Alcoholics Anonymous very seriously because my sister and I, from the start, were left alone quite often. This was the 80s, and the early mid 80s, and we were left alone quite a bit because we were homeless. And oftentimes, that's when the rooms were still smoke filled. And my mother was definitely a chain smoker, and oftentimes the only food we ever got was the coffee, water, and whatever sweets were there. We were pretty malnourished, and some bad things happened to my sister and I because we were left attended with some people that were in the program that were not well. And so my sister and I never had a good place in our heart for the word God or any of the words of Alcoholic Anonymous. And we avoided all of that like the plague. We never believed any of that stuff worked because it certainly didn't take away the life that we'd been given and the way our mother dragged us around like luggage. So I never wanted to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. I never wanted, and neither did my sister. But that did not mean that by the time we finally were having quote unquote normal lives, going to college, holding down jobs, and escaping from our past as best as we knew how, that once we both started to drink, then we drank fervently, binge drinking until blacking out from the very start. We didn't drink like that all the time because we had to work and go to school and whatnot. And our disease did not, it progressed, but in the beginning, it was a way that we would bond upon occasionally, and it was just something that we did because we had a hard time socializing into public. We learned to take on personas. We learned how to mask. We learned how to be a part of and push down our feelings. I used to always say my sister and I were like two generals from a very old war, and when we got together we drank a lot. And then when we were in public, we excused the fact that we would both drink a lot. And unfortunately for my sister, but by the grace of God, there go I. My sister ended up being incarcerated several times for drinking. She had a lot of hit and runs, and she got caught. uh, I was able to manage my life and get through community college and reclaim my education and eventually finish community college while working, but still upon occasion drinking very, very heavily like this. And then I went to UCSD. I got married, and not having the skills or knowing what I was doing. I married someone who abused animals, and I didn't know that about them because I married someone I barely knew because I'm also a love addict and a fantasy addict. So I didn't know how to take proper care of myself or have good boundaries. So the things I found out happened. And once that started happening, then my alcoholism, it wasn't alcoholism at the time that I knew of. It really ramped up. I had never lived in a household with someone who abused animals and kept bringing them in, and I didn't know how to leave because I didn't have the skills. So I drank. That's when I began drinking every day. And my sister was also drinking every day in her own world that she was in, and coming in and out of jails. And I was still managing, though, at that point to finish my education, though poorly. I had to take an additional year at that last year because my mental health, and I couldn't get to all my performances. I dropped out of the chamber opera at UCSD. I had to. I didn't want to do anything but drink. And and that is how I made my way through. And then I created another persona once I graduated, in order, because it was a hard time getting jobs when I graduated in 2008, and became a pinup bartender because that seemed like the right thing to do, because then I could drink every day and continue to squelch my pain, and deal with my feelings around the trauma that I experienced during my marriage that I was able to get out of, and deal with the guilt that I carried for the animals that were brought into my house that I could not save because my ex would do things to them while I was asleep. And I'll also, like I said, there's going to be some trigger warnings here because, what it was like was not great. Um, I have always fought against suicidal idealization. My first suicide attempt when I was 9 years old, after my sister was molested by someone in the rooms of AA who was supposed to care for us overnight. And I carried a lot of guilt in my heart and my body because it happened to her and I couldn't save her. And I also was relieved it didn't happen to me. And I've never been able to get over that, even though I do work my steps and I do my program. Um, I'm still, I give it up to God a lot. I still work on it. And I still remind myself that I'm new in this program. I've got 2 years, 7 months, and 3 weeks now. And I continue to work on some of these harder things in adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families and Love Addicts Anonymous while I continue to work my AA program. Before I came to AA, I couldn't stop drinking and I kept getting in and out of relationships because that is how, I was lonely. I had no sense of family. I had no one. And so being in a relationship was the closest thing that I could have. So I would go from one long relationship to the next. But of course, at that point, as a bartender, I was choosing heavy drinkers, people in bands, so on and so forth. And my lifestyle rotated around that and the chaos that got brought in from there. And as a result, I have a pretty extensive harms list, sexual misconduct list, which is why I put myself so hard into service and work so hard to have my life as though it is a living amends. Because honestly, there's a lot of blacking out and a lot of things I don't remember. I'll still have people occasionally come up to me in a grocery store and tell me about something that I've done that I didn't even know about. So that's been fun, but I keep praying for my willingness, and the program keeps me strong. And then my service to my animals and my community and my fellow homeless brothers and sisters help me stay on track for where I need to be. And like I said, when I first started, I actually started in Suicide Anonymous first, thinking I have to stop planning out my death. Because I'm taking care of all these animals on the streets, but the pain was so great. And so was the physical pain. I have fibromyalgia, chronic PTSD, and I have a neurodivergent brain from the trauma that was misdiagnosed as bipolar for years because of my mother's mental illness. They gave me the same diagnosis and plied me with a lot of medicines from the time I was 15 after my second suicide attempt. So let's just say I didn't get here on a winning streak. What had happened was that I had a relationship with another heavy drinker where our relationship was completely another relationship tied around, date night, which is drinking and so on and so forth. And that it was just working each day to get to the next day of drinking and avoid all my feelings about my life that I was very aware of. Therapy wasn't making anything better. And, uh, and then my sister finally took her life. She couldn't live with all the things that had happened to us. And the guilt and the shame that I had about not being able to help her more really ramped up my drinking. And I tried to write our memoir about our lives, and that made everything much, much worse. And I drank through all of it. And at that point, my drinking partner, my romantic partner at the time, said, you're an alcoholic at this point, because I couldn't stop. There were periods before then as a bartender, I would stop, right? We drink from October until after Cinco de Mayo, and then you take a cleanup break, right? You clean up, you do a little exercise, you do yoga, you do whatever. There's a part in the AA book that I really related to when I first came in the rooms where they're saying, instead of a wine, I'll do this. And for me, I could hear myself, well, instead of that, I'll do acupuncture. Instead of that, I'll do, because I'm also trying to chase chronic pain at the same time. Instead of this, I'll go ahead and I'll do yoga, and then I'll do this. But I did everything white knuckling it with the same fervent, like, urgency that this was going to be the thing and I was going to get better. Meanwhile, as soon as I'd pick up the drink again, it would escalate. And at that point, I started to have, even when I wasn't drinking, I was having blackout rages. And I knew about books like The Body Knows the Score. And like I said, I had lots of therapy, and I worked with people on, trying to get my emotional and mental health all right around it all, while I was helping the animals and trying to help, my homeless brothers and sisters while I work my jobs. And then I just couldn't. I couldn't do everything, became an obsession for how I was going to drink. And then I had created so many rituals at that point, which was like, oh, there's traffic when I drive home from work. Well, then I have to stop at happy hour because I don't want to drive in traffic. And I'm not going to lie, things like that still, like, every once in a while when I sit down to have a happy hour burger and I look at the menu, I think to myself, what a relief that I don't have this obsession to drink and then drive home drunk. Gosh, but by the grace of God, thank God, I never hurt anyone. I never killed anyone. And that's if there's no proof in my life, if there isn't proof of a higher power, I don't know what is, because they should not have turned out in this way so far. And there's a part of that in the 12 steps in 2 hours script that I get to read every once in a while for the zoo crew, that talks about, if you don't think that there's a higher power in your life, look at where you should have died. Look at, I mean, I can remember one instance where, that drunk logic. Oh, we're both drunk. I'll follow you home to make sure you get home safe. And my friend tells me he's behind me, and I'm a stop at the train tracks and next to the police. And I'm fiddling around with my radio station, and the police look over at me, and I'm on the tracks doing this. And then I drive away. And he says he's behind me. He goes, "This is the time she finally goes to jail." Like, that was, God bless. I mean, talk about living amends. So many of my friends were always, they were terrified. They had started to call me, like they would know when I'd start blacking out because I'd start smoking cigars and I'd take on all these weird affectations. And like I said, I have other problems from being on the streets. And they would be like, "Oh no, she's gone. She doesn't even know what she's doing anymore. Who We don't even know who this person is." And that person became, that's the only person I wanted to be all the time. I wanted to black out and be in that space all the time. And my friends were constantly, including my partners, talk about, I took them, emotional terrorism, like they were constantly trying to keep me from going to jail. Um, God knows why. Like I said, there must be a higher power. And I did try to be a good person in between those bouts. But after a while, all I wanted was to drink. I would avoid even seeing people or doing anything outside the minimal amount that I could do for the animal rescue and to earn a living, because I didn't want to be homeless ever again, and to keep things going. But I was really just a functioning drunk until I wasn't functioning anymore. After my sister's death, I just imploded, and I didn't, everything that happened was just pain. There was just tragedy in the streets, and I had no tools to handle, when things went wrong. In this program, I've learned how to walk with gratitude as medicine, my gratitude lists and my 12-step program in one hand, and the grief of what I experienced on the streets and the reprocessing of my own grief around all that, while I try and raise myself properly through this program while praying, which I didn't ever have that before. It's a miracle that that this exists. When I used to hear people say things like, "I'm a grateful alcoholic," I think to myself, what the hell? Especially given what my sister and I experienced and what we thought AA was. Contempt prior to investigation. Well, there was no investigation. I only had direct childhood experience. And not only that, AA had never made my mother any better. And the thing that gave me hope when I came in, talk about the gift of desperation. I couldn't not drink from hour to hour. So I found a meeting that started at 5 a.m. and I couldn't sleep anymore either. Like, I just, all I did was drink, pass out, drink, pass out, drink, pass out, get some work done, drink, pass out, drink, do work, pass out. That was it. Uh, and there was a 5 a.m. meeting here in Lemon Grove. It's a 10 and 11 prayer and meditation meeting. And sorry, I might get teary eyed, but I honestly believe that those people helped me save my life, because it kept me from going to the liquor store, which opened at 6 a.m. I would go there, do inventory, prayer, meditation, and then I'd stay for the next two meetings. And in those meetings, I would hear how it works, more about alcoholism, and I would hear people who were actively working their steps, really, really working hard at them, talk about where they'd come from and what they were doing. And I began to be willing to believe. Now, when I still heard God in the rooms, it still felt like I was being slapped in the face and punched in the stomach, because my conception of God, and having heard it as a child and then having had the experience that happened by these same people that would stand up in the rooms next to my mom and us while we'd be sitting there with her, saying these same words out loud, it was a lot for me to handle at first, because I was reliving a lot of that past trauma and fear. I had a lot of fear. I was terrified in those rooms. And I also felt like I was uh, besmirching my sister's memory by being there. Like I had failed her by uh, coming to a place we vowed together never to come to. I mean, even when she would go to these meetings, because she would be mandated by the court, right, and had to wear ankle bracelets, bless her heart, and everything, she'd call me on the way there, terrified and crying that she had to go there. And she, she didn't work the steps. She just went so that she could hurry up and get the hell out of there. And unfortunately, that's what led her finally, after many years of this going on, to not being here anymore, because she never did work the program. And my mother never worked the program either, but I began to have a little bit of hope in those rooms when I would hear how it works. If because I thought to myself, well, I can be honest with myself. I can be honest. I can do that much. I can be willing and I can be honest. And then I started to hear people say, like, good orderly direction, which is what I hear now when I hear the word God. Whenever I hear God, that which we call God in the rooms of AA, I hear good orderly direction. And I was able to start doing an inventory and did the best that I could in those inventories, but then I started to learn the prayers, and I met a man in there. I first met a woman on the first day I came in, and she put a book in my hand. She said, "I'll help you." And I said, "Thank God." Okay. I got a sponsor because I had heard that's what you're supposed to get on that first day I came in. And then after about a week of me going to those 5 a.m. meetings, because bless her heart, she couldn't be available that often. The miracles of going to Lemon Grove was that a woman in the first 3 days in Lemon Grove in the parking lot on my way in put the Everything A app on my phone. And then now I could get into meetings 24 hours a day because it correlated to my time zone, and I could just keep going to meetings. And so I did. I just stayed on there and I went to meetings and I just kept working. And then that 5 a.m. meeting, there's a gentleman there that a lot of people call Coach because he's a great step coach. He was working his program. He was no nonsense. He worked hard, and I think he maybe had when I met him, I think he had about 6 or 7 years working the program, and he was as when I'd heard his story, he was as intense and as hopeless and out of control as I was, and that gave me hope, and he helps so many people. And I was working with the other young lady, but going to Lemon Grove and hearing his stories, and seeing how the people in those rooms worked. And she had told me, bless her heart, that we had to read every page in that book together and then do my steps. And she said at the pace we were going, because our schedules didn't line up, that could take a year. And or something along those lines. And so I told the step coach, it was about 7 days in, I said, "Yeah, I don't." She says, "It's going to take me about a year." And he looked at me, he goes, "You're going to drink and you're going to die. You're not going to make it." And I was like, "Well, what do I do?" People tell me, I said, "I would love for you to help me. Can you help me? They say that I'm not allowed to work with men." And he said, "It doesn't say that anywhere in the book." He said, "You absolutely can work with men. You can't work with someone and do your inventory and get romantically involved, or start to have romantic feelings or transfer your feelings onto another person." That's why that's kind of generally there, because you have to keep your spirituality clean. So it's not advised, just to make sure that people, get where they need to be in their spirituality. But you absolutely can work with a man or a woman, but you must get this toolkit. You need this protection. And within the first 90 days of working with him, we finished all the 12 steps, and reading the book together in 60 days. I came every day and I read and worked with him. And when I say finished, right, my first round, but I was doing 1, 2, 3. He told me, I can't, your higher power can, and you're going to let it. And then he said, and then you're going to do, because he told me I could do any steps that had a number one in them every day. That the stuff we'd work on in between, we'd work hard at getting that done, so I'd have some safety, because that's what he was most concerned about for me. And talk about God sending just an incredible human being into my life. He's like, you need the power, you need to connect your higher power. He would never pick up a phone call unless I texted him and said it was important. And so I gave him the grace of not calling him, because I was in my lunacy all the time. And I went to meetings and I tried to be of service. He got me a service commitment, shaking hands on the second week. Ironically, at the same church where we had slept outside homeless and they had roused homeless people. So I was processing like a lot of stuff at once. And he said, that's it. You have to memorize your third step prayer, your seventh step prayer, your 10th step prayer, your acceptance prayer. He goes, and you must say them like medicine every time you're coming, having these past traumas come up for you, and your sick man's prayer. Like he just really rammed those into me. You must, for me, I'm not saying everybody, but for me, he's like, you must memorize them to have some medicine. And then he also had me go to the people that I loved who had been trying to help me save my life, who were in my life, and ask them about my good qualities and write up an accolades list because I had so much shame and I had so much abuse and I had such a low opinion of myself, even in my relationships. I lived to serve and served to live because that's all I knew how to do coming from my family of origin. And he said, you need to be able to read some things that are good about yourself. And so he said, I want you to get those and put them in your notepad. So when you're alone and there's no one else around, you can reread the things that people see in you until you can see them yourself. And then I finished, finished, we were like, okay, we got this. And the thing was, though, is at that point, we did do my harms list and my amends list, but so much of it was around my sexual misconduct, the things that had been done for me. And he was very, very clear about like, nope, the people who abused you, but you can't be a victim. I go, well, I never saw myself as a victim. It's not that. And he's like, yeah, but your body still feels that way. I mean, I was very lucky. This is a person who we also utilize some outside resources to help me with body trauma stuff that I could go into on my own. He did not go with me on that journey, but he made recommendations, and God bless him. He brought those materials to me and said, take this, work on this with this, pray to God with this. I found something else that might help you. And he never, one thing I really love and still loved about him and still love about him, I have never seen that man once tell someone, go read the first 664 pages and get back to me. He always reads with people, make sure they understand it. He enforced that I had to have a book study once a week minimum, a service commitment, where I'm out there shaking hands, because he knew that I at least had to be engaged with people and get over my fear of being in the rooms. And that was hard. My body shot back and reacted so hard. I had 15 major fibromyalgia strikes in the first 90 days that were so crippling I couldn't even see straight. But I continued, and then at 60 days, when I told people about where I was and where we had, when I got my 60-day chip, a woman tapped me on the shoulder and said, will you please take me through my steps? And I went to him and I said, how in the world can I do that? Don't people have to have a year or whatever? He goes, no, that is not how the original founders did it. You have been called to a holy task. Someone has heard your testimonial, seen what you have done, and they want you to take them through the steps. I'm going to help you. I will help you. You will get them through the steps. And it was really scary for me because I didn't know how to hold space where I was for all of her trauma and all of the things that she had gone through. I really was just barely existing on my own. And at that point, I was going to the zoo crew quite a bit, because thank God for the zoo crew, because they were still up and going when I couldn't sleep. And I saw workshops on sponsoring. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm this afraid, I was afraid to pass statistics. I was not very good at math. And I had to pass statistics and algebra and all that in order to get into UCSD. And these were not skills that I had. So I went and I got extra tutoring. So I thought to myself, well, I'm going to go to these workshops, and then I'm going to have people come to these workshops with me. And then that way I'm not alone. And then I'll check in with my sponsor, which by the way, my sponsor at the time was very anti-Zoom, which changed when he saw the change in me working with the zoo crew. And now he actually is a secretary, and has secretary commitments, and has been to several of the zoo crew 12 steps in 4 hours and 12 steps in 2 hours. And he's integrated some of the scripts into what he does because it's so effective, that I really can't say enough about that. So more people started wanting me to sponsor them from the recovery homes that came to Lemon Grove, and they were men. And so my course of action was, we go to the 12 steps in 4 hours. I will rework my fourth step. You will work your fourth step, and we will follow this plan of action alongside with the big book. And then we'll do prayer, meditation, inventory. There's a 5 a.m. online, thankfully. So thank goodness, I'm so lucky. I'm a Zoom baby, that there's online, because I'm able to work with people who can't get to me. And that was really the struggle about the first woman who asked to help me. Wonderful human being. I still talk to her today. So grateful for her that she put out her hand that first day and said, "I will sponsor you." It breaks my heart. Sorry. Whew. When I hear people say, "I've asked people to sponsor me and they won't sponsor me." So what I've come to understand, is that, you know, maybe a relationship doesn't work between trying to get someone through their steps and whatnot. But I would never, one thing I've learned from that is I would never tell someone, no, I will not sponsor you. I will tell you how I'm a step coach. This is what I do. And these are what my boundaries are around my time. But I would never tell someone no. If I'm not a good fit, I'm going to take you to like the zoo crew and have you sign up to get on the list so that you can find someone else. I also recommend to people that if you haven't found a sponsor, that doesn't mean you can't come to the 12 steps in 4 hours and sign up for temporary sponsorship. And one of the other things I really love about the 12 steps and 2 hours workshop is that it talks about in step 5 that, you know, you may talk to several people to do your fifth step. I find that that is so invaluable because it's also very scary, you know, to think of telling everything to everybody. Maybe you only feel comfortable with your closed mouth friend who will understand. Myself personally, I do find that it is. Better for me to talk to a fellow traveler who's working a 12-step plan of action because what do they say, better to talk to someone that, well, to find, it's not good to find the wrong person and have someone misunderstand. And you know who understands me? Another alcoholic. But that being said, I've also had some experiences around sponsorship and around some people in the rooms. You know, some of us are sicker than others. And by the way, when I say that, I'm pointing back at myself when I say that, because, you know, someone may want to help, someone may want to sponsor you, but if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. And I have seen some things and experienced some things and heard some things that aren't necessarily good because there are people who are trying to get well, and then there are people in the rooms who are in the rooms, but they're not trying to get well, but they are trying to make personal connections. And that's not what a sponsor is, from my understanding. From my understanding and the way that I have to work is it's clean. It's a clean, and that's why I love these workshops. It's clean. You talk to the people you feel comfortable with, and maybe, you know, you don't get all of your fifth step done yet. Maybe you're still looking for that next person, but don't stop writing your fourth step. And that was the other thing that I've experienced and continue to experience, which is why I continue to seek out more resources. That some people that I worked with really froze up on their fourth step. I had one person, we had to copy the book verbatim. I was like, well, we're doing a fourth step today. If we can't do anything in your, they froze and they completely shut down. And I get it because there was so much trauma and so much fear that I was like, okay, then we're just going to copy this one from the book verbatim and discuss it. And as we did that, they started to get a little bit braver each time. I'm not saying that's everyone's experience, but I did notice that that there was some blockages. This person wasn't wasting time. This person wasn't, kvetching at me all the time about their problems. They were doing what I required to be able to continue on, which was inventory, prayer, meditation every day. I don't talk to someone unless we're doing inventory and prayer together. I'm doing a 10th step with you, and we're going to talk about, well, what are you resentful about? What are you this? What are you that? That's how we're going to frame it. We're not just going to talk on endlessly about something. But what I was experiencing in many cases was that there was more in there than I knew how to handle. And I also was dealing with my own personal life. My partner, after my first 6 months, came back and said, well, I'd really like to be able to date you while you're sober. And he was definitely on my amends list. So I tried to do that. But as I did that and was able to listen to my body and be honest in inventory every day, I started to have some real emotional upsets. So that's when I started doing more of the emotional sobriety workshops, which ironically became, not ironically, wrong word, guys, which became the next avenue for me to be able to help the people I was working with to try to get their 4 steps done that were freezing up. So then that became our new place to meet up. Let's meet up at love and codependency and surviving a breakup. Let's meet up at reclaiming your thinking. Let's meet up at I want to stop procrastinating now. Let's meet up at the emotional sobriety workshop. Let's meet up at coping with change when your world keeps falling apart. Let's meet up at dealing with toxic people in your life. Let's meet up of letting go of unhealthy fears. Let's meet up at setting and enforcing boundaries in your life. Let's meet up at forgiving yourself and others. Let's meet up at love, codependency, and surviving a breakup. Let's meet up at getting over a breakup. And let's meet up at improving your self esteem and self confidence. Let's meet up at the PTSD workshop. And then, of course, 12 steps in 4 hours and the 12 steps in 2 hours. And between my jobs, would have my earphones in when I'd be out, either be out serving the animals or whatnot. And I was going to every one of those workshops I could and collecting the scripts and taking notes on them. And I met incredible brothers and sisters in recovery, and they're working on these, I call them emotional sobriety workshops. They're the workshops offered through the Zoo Crew that were helping me get more resources for the underlying conditions. And in doing that, I had more resources to give to others in the sense that I could say, let's go here together and discuss. What did you get out of that? What did you think about that? Let's do a 10 step inventory about it. And sorry, I get teary eyed. Some of the people that I was working with that were stuck on their 4 steps and couldn't move because of the things that had happened to them and the shame and the guilt, even though, it's like they just couldn't even get the words on the paper, started, sorry, to find words within the workshops, within the scripts. They started to sorry, whew, they started to get their voice. They started to get their voice back because some of these people that I worked with had gone through so much that they bit their tongues so often that they disappeared so many times in order to survive. Which is, again, when we say character defects, some of the people I work with, I remind them like to take the shame out. I say survival instincts gone awry that have become spiritual maladies. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for complete psychic and spiritual change, and we're looking to be able to bring those out. And the character defects are words that we're going to look at our vices and virtues. We're going to look at good, orderly direction. Well, how do we want to be? And and they started to find their own words in the workshops. Hey, Manhattan, I think I'm ready to do that 4 step thing again. I got some more words written down. And they started writing vice and virtues, and we had those lists going. They're like, okay, I think I'm ready to do that. And then I went to one 12 step and 4 hour workshop, and I don't know who it was that did it, but it blew my mind. During the 7th step, they brought out the 7th step prayer, and they used the vices and virtues and said, instead of this, give me this, right? Every single defect of character that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Instead of this, give me this. Instead of this, give me this. So then I incorporated that when I was doing my fifth, sixth, well, doing the fifth, sixth, and seventh with someone, because I do them all the same at the same time. You know, we do that and then we do the sixth, and then they go and they meditate for a little bit. I meditate for a little bit. And then we come back when we get that seventh. I'm like, okay, let's go. Let's do this. Let's bring this up to God. Instead of this, give me this. Give me instead of this, give me this. Instead of this, make me this. And then this is becomes a language that when we're doing our inventories or something's happening in our daily life, we see the trigger, we see the thing happening before our eyes, and we understand where it's coming from behind our eyes, and then we make a conscious prayer to God, like the 10th step prayer, right? Like, help me watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And when these crop up in me, you know, God, please, I'm paraphrasing here, guys, because I'm just flowing here. You know, help God, please help remove these from me, and then help me, I'm paraphrasing, take right action, right? Instead of this, give me this. What am I going to do instead? And then we talk about the St. Francis prayer, right? Make me a channel of your peace. Instead of fear, give me love. Instead of this, give me that. So that I have a moment to breathe in my body and pause and pray, and then pray for right action and look for someone or something I can do to help to get me outside of myself. And so I started doing that. And then that's what I would recommend to others and continue to. And the other thing I want to say about prayer and meditation is another thing I heard in the room. And this is one thing that's so great about going to meetings. I mean, for me personally, without step work, book study, I have to always ask myself when I'm in the room, you know, what do I have to say here that's going to help a newcomer see that this is not hard? This is constant work, but the benefits that we're going to reap will be miraculous. We will change. The ninth step promises are going to come true if we do this work every day, and we're going to be able to make our lives and other lives better. And in one of the rooms, I heard a gentleman say, when I speak, I pray, which blew my mind because I was like, wait a minute, I need to be more mindful of my speech. And when I listen, I meditate, which really, I'd always heard, and I believed it and still do. This is part of my willingness and my belief that there's intelligence in the empty space. Einstein used to say there's intelligence in all the empty space. And for me, that became my first willingness for God, that there's intelligence in the empty space. There's intelligence here. And then I needed something stronger than that. And I made the 12 steps of AA my higher power. I had to do that for me, and still to this day it probably is, but it's always developing and changing. And I pray for a willingness to be able to understand other people's higher power, so that I can allow space for their higher power to work in their lives and hear them talk about how it works, without putting any of my own stuff on top of it. But that's something that's really important to me now, is the empty space. I really have a hard time with that because I still work very hard at everything I do to survive, and I will never stop doing this work. This work, working these workshops, has taken me to other programs that are helping me understand and work through things. But without the 12 steps of AA as my foundation, I don't know what I'd do, because, guys, I have gone to a couple other programs that I needed to, Love Addicts Anonymous and Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. But without my 12 step program for me in AA being a solid foundation in my life every day, I don't think I could have ever done this work that I'm doing now. Like I said, I was in therapy. I tried to write a memoir, and all that did was just set my body on fire and make me not want to be on the planet filled full of guilt and shame. But I have the tools here. I have that 10th step prayer all of the time to remind me, and having an inventory with my fears written out, my resentments, to see how oftentimes they're two sides of the same coin, and that a lot of my survival skills are coming out of that, and that how those translated into my harms list and my sexual misconduct and where that came from, and it does come from. The mindfulness of it all and the connection to it all, a spiritual, set of spiritual practices. This set, 12 steps of spiritual practices, is the most, I keep saying the word miraculous, but I don't know how else to say it. It is miraculous, and the change is incredible. The thing that I have to remind myself of, and you're probably even hearing it in my speech because I want to make sure I get it all out for you, is the empty space. Because I have to breathe. I have to allow God to come in, and that takes work. And that's not something I've ever had. So one of the other workshops I went to from the Zuku in the very beginning, because when I heard about prayer and meditation, I thought, oh God, I'm screwed. I'm not going to be able to do that. My brain is like a monkey, even when I'm doing yoga. And the zoo crew had this meditation, and I can't even remember what it's called, but it's a meditation meeting, and it was the most simply explained to me that I could digest at the time, and that was the facilitator said one of the prayers and timed it, and then she said, "Congratulations, you just pray, or you just meditated for 15 seconds," and they taught me how to start to discipline my mind. I'm still doing those things. I still say the prayer. Well, right, it's prayer, right? It's the active part. I still say my prayers. I still pray for others. I still say my prayers when I'm in trouble. I'm still working on the empty space. I don't, sorry, I don't know what's coming next because only God knows. But I do know that when the student is ready, the teacher comes. So I align myself in my service, in what I do, in this program to make myself as ready as possible. I do it for me. I do it for the legacy of my family that it never happened for. I do it to heal the legacy of my family and rewrite the script of what Alcoholics Anonymous is in our family. I do it to heal myself and the sins of my fathers and my mothers. And I do it to be able to find out who I am. And I really honestly never thought I would get to the point where I would wake up in the morning, even if I have chronic pain, which, by the way, miraculously, I have less chronic pain 2 years, 7 months, and 3 weeks later than I did when I started. My doctors can't figure out what's going on because I'm not on any medications and I've been re-diagnosed. Thankfully, through all the workshops I've worked, we've talked about what's going on, and they've understood, and I've understood that the diagnoses that I carried had to do with my historical family of origin stuff that was put upon me, and that I now have a way to stay centered, and that's changed for me. That's a miracle. And I don't know what other miracles are coming. I don't know how much time I have on the planet. I never thought I would wake up in the morning and say, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I can better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power and thy love and thy way of life. And may I do thy will always. And then when I do my 7-step prayer, I remind myself that Bruce Lee said, don't pray for an easy life, pray for strength. And I love that quote in the 12 steps in 2 hours from Muhammad Ali that says, service is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. And my higher power has definitely shifted a little more because there's some moral principles of Mr. Rogers. I always ask myself, what would Mr. Rogers do here? And I can only ask that I become a wiser, more boundaried person who can give out of strength and learn how to listen and listen to learn. And I hope and I pray that I'll continue to do the work and that I'll be able to take action even in this moment to just breathe and let God in. Because whenever there's a door shut, I have to breathe and look for the window because the sunlight of the Spirit is there. We are all wondrously and fearlessly made. I wish you all well on your journey. If you're new here, there are good people here. This program does work. They're not kidding when they say it works if you work it. God bless you, whatever you conceive God to be, and keep you. Thank you for letting me share my story. And I hope that I see you in the rooms and in the emotional sobriety workshops. And I'll be around as long as God wants me here to serve, because without God, I can't. But without me and without you guys, God can't. And the young ones are out there and they're going to need us. We are the next old timers. We must do more than just hand someone a book and say, read 164 pages and get back to me. And that's what the Zoo Crew does. They reach out to everyone. They don't tell you, just go read the book and come back. They create workshops. They create podcasts. They create book studies. They continue to get out there and serve so that there can be miraculous change in everyone. I hope you heal. I hope that your children, your inner children, get all the love that they need so that you can go back out there and help the next alcoholic, the next addict who comes into these rooms understand how to use this toolkit and send them right back out. And if you're in an emotional sobriety workshop or the 12 steps in 2 hours or 4 hours and it was good for you, please, when people say, do you have an AA announcement? Announce the next one and give someone that information. Show them how to put the Everything AA app on their phone. Teach them how to navigate the website for the Zoo Crew so that they can get the tools to be the next person to help, because you never know where they're going to be and they're going to need that toolkit. You don't know what foxhole they're going to be in, and they're going to need to be able to tap into that power. And you have the power to give them that. So do that. I love you all. And thank you for letting me share my story.
Manhattan, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your story with us today. And I'm sure our members will enjoy listening to it. Have a great day and keep trudging the road of happy destiny. And to you out there listening, please subscribe. And I hope that you enjoyed listening to Manhattan's story. Please subscribe if you have not yet subscribed. Like our videos, comment on our videos, and share our videos, please. It helps us, it helps you, it helps others. Please feel free to share our videos along with our website and podcast link. Our website is thezoocrew.org. Thezoocrew.org is the website, and everything is on there. Again, thank you, Manhattan.